This is a joint project between ADR Rodeo International and Claros Coaching. And today's topic is, what does it take to build trust? And I think, as many of you are some junior mediators, some experienced mediators, this is one of the biggest questions that we all ask ourselves, is how do we create that trust? And sometimes we have a very short amount of time to do that. Even if we have pre-mediation meetings and we have phone calls and video calls, really getting to the bottom of how you build trust is one of the big million-dollar questions. So Tasneem is our resident expert, and she will bring some incredible insight to this. And for some of you, you will know that we have been running the coaching club pretty much from the beginning of the pandemic online. We've had hundreds of people come onto the coaching club, and others take on other coaching activities with Tasneem as their individual needs change. So, and of course, Tasneem will share some more of that a bit later. But I wanted to say welcome. I hope that everything is well and safe for all of you in all the different parts of the world. I know we've got people in New York, people in the UK, people in Kenya, people in Europe, Dubai. I mean, it's Turkey. This is just incredible to have all of you with us. And I hope that you continue to join more and more events and activities with us. And let us know if you have ideas for topics that you think we should cover in sessions like this. I'm sure many of you are a bit zoomed out. There's a bit of Zoom fatigue going on. But at the same time, we are in that the end of the tunnel, but not quite there from this pandemic. So we've got a few more months of Zooming around. And then hopefully, for those of you that are able to attend in-person events, we'll do both. We'll hybrid these into live and online events. So I'm delighted to welcome Tasneem, and I want to say a big thank you to Kim and Veronica, who are online, for all the work that you've done behind the scenes to put all this together. And so Tasneem, over to you.
Okay, welcome everyone, and really happy to be having this opportunity. And I know there's fatigue online, so we're going to try and make this a little bit interactive with some polls, because it's so difficult to just hear someone and you feel that the screen is in front of you. So let's see what we can do. So a little bit about me. I'm an organization and executive coach, and I've been that for 25 years. I'm a mediator, especially in the workplace, and some family stuff, especially around partnership dynamics. I've studied human dynamics all my life, and I've actually come up with a book, which will be out soon, called Human Touch Leadership, which you'll get to hear out in due course. I have a bachelor's in psychology, a master's in performance management. I am a chartered fellow, CIPD, and the National College of Psychotherapists. And I'm certified in Berkman, which is a personality assessment, emotional and conversational intelligence. But more importantly, like all of you, I want to fix problems, and I like to find viable solutions, and I'm continuously learning. This session today is, what does it take to build trust? So I just want to ask all of you, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? How are you feeling? What are some of you can just put that in the chat box, a little bit about where you're from and what you're currently feeling at the moment. Emotions are really important. Just in the chat box, just tell me how you're feeling. Just some comments. And Kim, if you can share them, that would be great.
Yes, so we've got hopeful, happy, strong, fabulous, content. We've got very happy emotions so far. Overwhelmed, in fact. Strong, someone from New York. Happy, excited.
Great. And if we could just put a poll up, how many years have you been practicing as a mediator? So I can get a sort of feel of the group.
It disappeared.
It disappeared, the poll?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's back.
It's back. Yeah. Okay. Have we got, okay, that's great. So it's good. We have some experience and we have 42% who are less than a year. So why do I talk about emotions? I think, are we recording this session from here? And is it okay to record it?
Yes, we're recording.
Okay. Why do I ask about emotions? Because, you know, emotions are part of each one of us. You gave up some positive emotions, but actually most of us experience mixed emotion. And also when you're dealing with your parties in mediation, they also have mixed emotion. What's important to know about emotions, they're contagious, they're data. They are definitely data. And emotional literacy is very, very important because it has a label to an emotion. They're energy, and you feel it in every part of your body. You can also feel it when you feel emotions in your stomach, in your chest, in your neck. But what's important about emotions, they're assets and they signal and serve a purpose, and they affect us. So how we work with them and how we use them effectively is part of building emotional intelligence. That underpins a lot of the work that we talk about when we talk about building trust. Today, we are going to look at neuroscience and how that can play a part in trust. We're going to explore how the state of our mind affects the outcome, and how to use current language to build trust. With that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the human brain. If we look at the human brain, it's quite complex, but it's very, very powerful. The emotions that I talked about actually stem off from the amygdala part of the brain, which is the primitive side of the brain, which is between the primitive and the limbic. And the limbic we know is the animal, and the primitive we know is the reptilian. But I think what's really important to know is that the human mind has two aspects of the brain which are very unique. One is the one for language, which is called the neocortex. And we also have the prefrontal cortex, which is the one that analyzes, that synthesizes, that is creative, that pulls everything together. So in learning to use the human mind, we only have one brain and it's all pulled together. But I want to tell you a little bit about the human heart brain. And that's the oldest brain because it's associated with trust. It enables us to connect all our internal systems and enables us to connect to other. So the heart brain tells us, are we in sync with others or we are not in sync? Shall we move towards that person or shall we move away from that person? Do I have some form of apprehension? Do I really want to move with this? So if we think about the heart brain working with the limbic and primitive brain, which is the limbic is storing all those emotional memories of our emotions as they get fired up. But it also nurtures and builds relationships. And it builds the sort of clans and what we feel about people. It also helps us to establish, how do I fit in? And it gives us a social context to the way we work with others. And I know that that is really important as we conduct our mediation. So I just want to take up I just want to take you through a visualization at the moment. And the newbies, think of any encounters that you have felt if you haven't conducted a mediation process. So in this sort of visualization, I want you to for a moment, think of the touch points that you have online and offline to build trust. So could be the first contact you have with a party in a mediation. It could be the first contact you have with the other party. It could be a contact that you're having offline, even in an email. or even a contact with an outside stakeholder that could be involved with the mediation process. That could be a lawyer or an accountant or anybody who's building this relationship that we can say with you and the parties to build trust. So what would some of those touch points be? If you want to use the chat box, use the chat box, but I just want you to think of some of these touch points. And I want you to think of what are the thoughts and feelings that you have at the outset of building trust. And what do you think their thoughts and feelings are? So if you want to use the chat box, please go ahead and just put some of these thoughts and feelings at the outset out. Okay, are there any comments in the chat box? Okay, let's move on with our poll. Our next poll is looking at, when considering building trust, what are you most impacted by? What impacts you most when you're building trust? Is it their body language? Is it their tone of voice? Is it words? Is it emotions? Or is it other? Other could be the credibility or something that somebody said about the person. What are you considering when building trust? And what are you most impacted by? Okay. Aha, it's interesting that we've had words is not affected there. Okay, this will help me know where to pitch it. Thank you for that. Thank you for completing the poll. Let's look at how our mind works. In the world of conversations and conversational intelligence, we incorporate the use of emotional intelligence as well. So if you think when you are dealing with another person, let's think of people within your mediation. You could resist going into a discussion with them, or they could resist. One party may be resistive, and there's low trust because they're thinking, what is this really about? Where am I? They could be skeptic about you. They could be looking at wait and seeing. Now, this whole process in the brain is affected by the way we listen, the way we are triggered, and our perceptions about the situation. It all works together. We want to look at the part of the brain to build trust that is going to move the person towards experimenter, the green portion, and co-creating solutions together to build high trust. When we're in low trust or conditional trust and we're not quite sure, it is language that helps the person move from the red to the green. So imagine the brain works like a computer. You have one brain, but the different parts of the brain work in conjunction. We are relating to this in our emotions that get triggered by different factors that affects our response. So if I am not sure about going into a mediation process, because I don't trust the other party and what they're going to say, or I really don't think it's going to work, I'm actually going to be in the red zone. And when I'm in the red zone, I am going to fill my brain with different chemicals. So I'm going to go back and forth between these slides. So the brain is going to be filled with cortisol. And what cortisol does, it's a neurotransmitter or a chemical, and it shuts your brain from thinking straight. So if you're resisting, or you're closed-minded, or you're being protective, or you're being judgmental about the process, and you're resisting or being skeptical, you're just going to release more cortisol. And cortisol is going to shut the brain because it protects you. and it wants you to think straight. So possibly some creative and open-mindedness is not going to happen. And if you're looking at, oh, well, let me see, let me just go into this mediation process, let me see if I can really do it, you're going to be limiting yourself, because you need some words or confidence or acknowledgement to move you to being in the experimental stage. Because what you need is more oxytocin. Oxytocin is a bonding chemical. It actually opens up the neurotransmitters of the brain to allow you to be more receptive. Dopamine is also a neurotransmitter that opens up the capacity of the human mind. And dopamine comes from, what are the results I'm going to see at the end of it? What will be the outcome? Wow, that was a good process. I feel really good about that mediation. What you do is you pump that dopamine. Serotonin is also a chemical that, a neurotransmitter that opens up these pathways. And that comes very much about practices that you do within yourself, or even come if you can set up a way of forgiveness or gratitude through the process, through words. Now, all these facts that I'm saying to you are based on research. And if you want more research about this, you know, there is quite a lot of research with the Harvard Business, Mind and Body, and their research with other neuroscientists. And a lot of the work that I, have learned has been through the conversational intelligence training and the emotional intelligence training that I've been through. But there is a lot of public research out there, and there is more and more evidence, and you can actually see it and feel it. Once you get to know that you are having an oxytocin rush or a cortisol rush, you'll say, ouch, I don't know if I want to deal with that situation, or what that person said really affected me. So let's go back to this. We want to help in a good partnership in building trust. We want to support the person to release more of the right chemicals by the way we listen and acknowledge the person, by the way we acknowledge their emotions, and by the way we choose words to focus on that human capacity of the brain. So we want to release that oxytocin in our conversations. Resistors, and we've all seen them, are protective, and they're not open to being influenced. They go into a mediation almost to say, well, I'm just doing it for the sake of it, but I really don't believe it, and they're doubtful. So you've just seen what happens to their brain. It is closed. Your role as a mediator is to try and open this up more. If they're in the wait and see stage, that is a good stage. But how do you influence the touch points before the joint mediation process? That's the art of your mediation. That influencing them in the messages that you send them, the conversations you have before the talk, and the conversations that you have even with an external mediator. Experimenter is open to hear. So you yourself, are you open to hearing and not conditioned by your thoughts to take the risk to build trust? So it starts with you. And the more you work on yourself as a mediator and prepare for the mediation, you will then share the signals to open up the other person's mind. If your own mind is skeptical that this mediation process is going to work, we have a part of our brain that has neurons, and we call them mirror neurons. And now I've seen, even during the lockdown, that these mirror neurons are getting transferred in our communication online. And people will pick up what you're saying just by the words and through certain body language. And of course, this online mediation is constantly being looked at, but the more we professionalize ourselves with online mediation and get to listen to the cues will only make us more effective as we build trust. because trust underpins every single mediation process. The co-creative is, are we willing to work with the other to brainstorm solutions with a bigger picture in mind? This is the way you ask your questions, the way you reframe and analyze the situation. I'm going to give you a real example. And this is an example that happened just last week for me, just to help you think about how this process works. So I was asked to conduct, it wasn't a mediation, it was a redundancy appeal, but it could easily have been a mediation process. So the lawyer asked me to conduct this as an independent for an appeal. My goal, and why she asked me, is to remain neutral, to hear both sides of the issue and give an independent response. Now, obviously, the lawyer has their own interpretation of the event. So they will give me their own view about the situation. The client that has hired me has their own view of the situation. As a mediator or as a neutral conduit, I need to check my thoughts and feelings about the situation. So one, I needed to think, am I competent? Can I do this? Am I sure myself that I can do this and make the best job of this? Am I going to park any biases that I could be having about the situation, or any thoughts or memories of examples where I have seen employers work with employees? I'm going to check all that to see that I go into that process completely neutral. That's important. The second is, during every conversation with the parties, I'm training my mind in the given moment to focus on the purpose of the conversation. The minute I find myself slipping back, I'm almost breathing, taking a deep breath when I find that my opinions are coming in the way. So it's really important during the process, because at any point during the mediation process, if I use a word or I say something that makes the other person feel that, oh my gosh, she just wants to take the other person's side. She's coming with her own bias. She's already had a preconceived opinion about this. That brain is going to shut down and the cortisol is going to pop in. And I will possibly have to work harder. So I need to be conscious during the process that I remain neutral. And that means open my mind to really listen to the heart of the conversation from both sides, which means that when I go back and look at all the email correspondence and everything that has come through, I go to looking at it with the other person's thoughts in mind. It's important to pause and reflect. This was not a straight mediation, as I said, but the process could have easily been about a mediation. The employee didn't understand the process. Now, this is an employee had never been through a process where an outsider comes in and talks about a situation. It was new for them. So as I was contacting the employee didn't understand. As I was contacting the employee asked, why are you communicating with me? I don't want it. So there was a lot of backslash on the way they were looking at the communication online. Trust needed to be established. In the conversation, I heard lots of skepticism, and words that I needed to use in the first 3 minutes to build a rapport. So in building a rapport, in the first 3 minutes, I had to remain grounded, because what the employee said to me was, I don't know why you're coming in. This is just a waste of time. Again, I think you just have an agenda, was just firing attackful comments to me. I needed to think, what was the purpose in mind? So going back again, I needed to train my mind to focus on the purpose of the conversation. I needed to not get off balance myself with the emotions of being attacked, but look at how can I hear this person with real empathy and listen to their objections about the issue. The minute I acknowledged them and I listened and I acknowledged the emotions of how difficult it was for them to see that an outsider has been brought in, and yes, it must be difficult, and I would find it difficult too. What it did, it opened up the whole conversation because oxytocin was pumped into their brain. I didn't go in to say, well, this is what you need to do, and I'm here to talk to you, and that's it. And this is my role, so I just need to ask you a few questions to go to what your thoughts are about that. If I'd done that, I wouldn't have understood the emotion behind it. I needed to rephrase my language in a way that builds that rapport with that employee so that they could open out and feel comfortable about the process. So we know that we will have skepticism. We will have a time where people will be resistant to the conversation. You as a mediator are building trust even from the email stage of communication. How do you check yourself? How do you reread that email to see that it could be read in the most positive light? How are you using words and language that increases more oxytocin in that brain? In your one-on-one conversations, and I want you to just think about this and write some points down for yourself. Think of a mediation that you are about to do or that you have observed. And if you take a piece of paper as I write, as I go through these questions with you, think of what they say to you and how you need to interpret this in a way to increase more oxytocin and dopamine. So think of what one party has said to you and how you will now build trust with the other party in the conversation, to start the conversation, to build trust with them. And if you're not in a mediating a situation, I want you to just think of an engagement that you have had, maybe with somebody, and what they said to you that wanted you to build trust with them. And what language they used and how they spoke to you to feel, yes, I can go along with this. Okay. Be conscious of the phrases and words that would trigger cortisol. So if I was to look at this, words that would trigger cortisol for me is, you need to do this now. Your time is limited. We need to submit a report and have this mediation closed in 2 days. Pressure. I know that you don't have much time on your plate, but I need to have this done and have a meeting with you within 3 days. Do you feel that anything that's pressure creates cortisol? What are the things and words and phrases that could build oxytocin? I know it's really important for you to have a positive outcome of the situation. And I'm going to give you an opportunity to really hear you and remain completely neutral. I want to hear your side of the story. And I know that it must have been, this is a really emotional time for you. Interestingly enough, when you use phrases and language that opens their mind up, you will be surprised that it won't take hours and hours of mediation. If somebody feels acknowledged and heard and understood and builds that rapport and trust within you, with you within the first few minutes, the mediation could go a lot faster. Does anyone want to share in the chat or ask a question about this process on how the mind works before I move on? Anyone? Okay, are there any questions?
None at the moment, Tasneem.
Okay, so everyone is in a very sort of thinking mood about this.
Sorry, Tasneem, actually just one came through.
Okay.
When someone is in amygdala brain, what is your strategy to calm them down?
Okay, so I'm going to give you 2 or 3 strategies. When they're in the amygdala hijack side, at that moment when they're hijacked, maybe by a word or an attack or something, then they're going into past memory very, very quickly, which means their mind will be blocked to hear any future. It's almost like brakes put on. The best cause for you is first understand and unpack a little bit about their emotions. This seems to be a very emotional time. If you have a list of emotional literacy words, ask them how they're feeling. What does this make you feel? And they'll say, I'm fed up, I'm angry, I just want this out. But the moment they speak those words, what's happening? They're diffusing the emotion. Another strategy maybe is to, let's take a break here. Just a few deep breaths and get them to breathe deeply, or even take a physical break and come up with the conversation later. But another point is, once you acknowledge and listen to them from their perspective, then you can start asking questions and the amygdala can shift. It can shift in almost seconds. The example that I had, which I dealt with about a few days ago, he was at an amygdala attack. The first 3 minutes he was firing at me, and you could see his amygdala was hijacked. And all I did was acknowledge emotions. I know it's really difficult. And as he gave more and more emotions, I just acknowledged it so I would bring that emotional, escalation down. And when I felt his body language come straight down, I could see that the amygdala, the oxytocin was kicking in. And I said to him, if you want to end the conversation now, I'm okay with it, because I know it's a really painful time for you. And we can regroup at another time. But if I can give you the assurance that I'm here to really hear things from your perspective, and I have no hidden agenda in this, that opened him up. Okay, so you can move somebody who's having an amygdala attack just by acknowledging their emotions and assuring them through reflecting language that they have used that is their language and rephrasing it. The challenge comes when you are speaking and you may be in a position where you have an opinion and you say something, well, have you ever thought, what would it take for you to be present? And if you say that and they're still in the amygdala, they're not going to shift. They're not going to shift. Because you're asking them for a solution when they're already triggered. So the really good question, always start asking those opinionated questions when you have acknowledged the emotion and you see the shift has opened their mind. Otherwise, they will still be in the amygdala state. So choose words and phrases that could build more oxytocin. So not what will it take, because that's you're going to a solution, but I know that the time that you have gone through is quite painful, and we are all experiencing a great amount of stress. And I know both parties are experiencing a great amount of stress in this situation. A light bulb goes because you've acknowledged the emotion. I really am here to help you to move forward in this. The we conversations, when you're going towards solutions, is when you are not attacking one party over another or saying what the other party wants to the other. So the other party may say to you something like, you know, we have one day to close this, and I'm really fed up with the way this person is acting. If you go to that party and say, you know, you've got one day to close this because they really want to come to a solution quickly, they'll still be resistive or in that red zone. But if you say to them, this is where you start reframing or rephrasing conversation, that I know it's just as important for you to come up with a solution because this has been a very stressful time for you. And I know that it's in your interest as well, that you don't want to worry about this anymore. Can you see the difference in the language? It's, she understands. Oh, okay. So I didn't put the pressure on the time limit. I didn't say those words. I rephrased it in a way to help them open their minds. Are there any other questions?
No questions at this time, Tasneem.
Okay. So did we have a poll going up at this stage?
Yeah, I will just put that up now.
Okay. Thank you. This gives me an idea of where you're at in language on building trust. Okay. Okay. Great. So you use that. So I hope the you know, because a lot of you use it naturally, I hope understanding more about where the brain works and the chemicals associated with it gives you some indication of how important words are in creating a mental, emotional, and conversational environment to activate higher levels of partnering. It is a work in progress, and the best way to understand that is to understand yourself first. Think of the words that trigger you, maybe not just the tone of voice, but start noticing the words that people say that trigger you or set you back, and the words that encourage you to coming forward, and what could possibly be happening in your brain. We know that as mediators, we want to create a safe environment for everyone to be open. So you get to the heart of the issue, and you're there to help to shift them to coming up with the best solution for both parties. So think of the actions and words that will enable the other person to shift from protective to partner. What will help them to shift, and what words of acknowledgement and words or phrases that could help them shift. And that starts with you learning about it from yourself. And then think of what we can say to reduce the conflict when you are in a conversation together. So what I have learned and practiced is when I have two parties together and I'm trying to get a solution and knowing both what each mind thinks of, I carefully craft some questions that will look at mutual success. So it'll be questions around what will it take for you to feel that emotion that you felt at the beginning of your partnership? What will success look like to you both? So it's using language that incorporates more we than I. And please, I know this is just a webinar, but please feel free to email me and I could send you some words of vocabulary, a list of words that you could use, and I'll just send them to you to help you through your through the process of language that you could use to create a mutual success and the types of questions. I've put a lot together myself, so I can send that to you if anybody's interested, just to help you experience it and also build on language and phrases that can open up discussions. Thank you all.